Hey Mackie, it's Uncle Dave. So you sent me a video and I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to review it and I'm going to do it in real time. So I haven't watched any of the hands, so I don't know what the results are going to be. So I'll be able to do it sort of as we go. And what I'm going to try and do is sort of reference, if necessary, some of the stuff I've already sent you, specifically like hand rankings. So if you play a hand and I say, okay, this is like a tier B and you're playing it too strong, too weak, whatever, then you have that sort of reference point. So it'll be the hand ranking tier list and then the questions to ask tier list that I sort of talked about in the last video. So without further ado, let's get it going. Get it super high quality. Lay it back like as quick as we can. I'll just pause it as we go. Could I full screen this? Probably not. No, can't do that. I'd rather not have the nonsense on the edge. All right, we can do like that. All right, that's not too distracting. All right, so first hand, got a couple queens. I think this is obviously a great spot. Um, I suggested you open to 4 times at these stakes specifically. So with 1, 2, 3 limpers, you want to go 4 times plus the 3 limpers. So I probably open to 70 cents. You could even do 80 cents, 90 cents, $1. You really want to try and just get against one opponent if at all possible. So good raise. I just go more in this situation. And then got you flop top set. Okay, so you flop top set and this player leads into you. I would immediately look at his stats and see if he's a loose wild player or whatever. Um, just sort of get used to that idea. You flop top set, but your hand is vulnerable. Even though it's a massive hand, you have the nuts right now. You can ask yourself, is this hand um, likely to have hit my opponent? That's one of the S tier questions, I think. Um, Did I hit the flop? Is it likely to hit others? So this is a very wet flop, meaning there's 2 clubs, there's a flush draw, 10 jack is a straight draw. There's a decent amount of things going on with this hand. So I would likely do a small raise on this flop. You have the absolute best hand, your opponent showing strength. Why not try and get a little more money in there? And so you decide to call, and that's fine. I mean, calling's absolutely fine there. But again, if this turn card were the 8 of clubs, you no longer have the nuts, and in fact, the flush gets there, the straight gets there. Um, so your hand is very, very strong on the flop, but it's not impenetrable. So the fact that you are now nutted, so you basically have the best possible hand unless your opponent has quads, meaning like you can never protect yourself against quads. So you want to get your entire stack in. So now would be an opportunity to slow play. So basically so if your opponent bets again, I would be calling this river and giving him or her an opportunity to bluff again on the river if they don't have anything. So your opponent bets again, and this is a little bit of a smaller bet. So they bet 250 into, I think it was like, I don't know, $8, $9 pot. Again, shows weakness. I don't talk about this that much, but generally speaking, especially against weak players, the smaller bets they make relative to the pot, the weaker they are. So this is a weak bet because it's only a quarter of the pot. So I would probably call here just because now you have the absolute nuts essentially. There's no card in the river that would scare you, and there's lots of cards in the river that could give your opponent the second best hand. So here I would likely just call, especially because when you call, if you were to call this 250, you basically have less than the size of the pot left in your stack. So to get it all in on the river should be really, really easy. So you elect to raise, which is fine, and you take it down there. So decent. That hand I'd give you like a 7 out of 10 on. So that's a good way to look at all the tables. So you could see real quickly there's 2 or 3 players over here that were super weak, a couple of tighter players over here. Just giving you a general idea. Okay, so you got 2 8s. What are you going to do here? Depending on the action. Okay, so there's a min raise. The fold. So this hand can be played 2 ways. It can be played to try and hit 3 of a kind. So I think anything between like 2s and 9s can be invited to have a bunch of players playing with you, and then you're trying to hit 3 of a kind, and if you don't, you sort of fold. It can also be played aggressively, where you're going to play it very aggressively, try to just get one opponent, try to just get it against one opponent, um, and then, sort of take it down on the flop. So both ways are fine. Depends on, do you like being a little more aggressive player overall? So this is great. You raised quite big, and this player seems to be a very loose player, so he could be a target for the future. And now when two players call, there's no value in betting here. It's ace, king, deuce with 2 spades. No one's going to fold an ace or a king. Um, if you were against one opponent, you could certainly bet, but against two players, I think this is just a check and give up situation. Okay, so you bet $2.18. So you did a large bet. So if I were to continuation bet on this board, I would bet quite small, because if your opponent has an ace, they're never going to fold, and you're basically trying to fold out someone who has 10 jack, 8 9. What hands are you trying to get to fold on an ace king board? Because your opponent's most likely holdings when they call raises, or when they raise themselves, are going to be big aces, big kings, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, king queen, king jack, those sorts of hands. So this betting, almost the full pot, is this 100% a bluff, and you're bluffing into two players, and you're bluffing into a terrible player who would likely call you down with like a king 4. So I think checking here is the best option, and then betting very small just to try and get the players who have absolutely nothing to fold is the second best option, but I wouldn't recommend betting a large size here. Okay, but it worked, and both players folded, so there you go. But I wouldn't be results orientated, because it worked doesn't necessarily mean it was recommended play. Okay, ace 4. Try and skip a little bit through 3 5. Hold that one. 9 10 early position, no probs. 9 7 in the small blind. So one thing I would recommend not doing is pre-choosing the check fold in any situation, because there may be a very occasional time when even a hand like 9 7, which is quite weak, um, if you're in the small blind, let's say, and this player limps and this player limps and this player limps, and you're in the small blind with 9 7, you could limp because you're getting a 50% discount. And so you might be risking 5 cents to try and win a pot that was like 70 cents. And if you play a hand like 9 7, you're literally trying to flop a straight, or you're trying to flop 2 pair. And if you flop anything else, you can just easily get out of the way. So I think just using the pre action, it can also show to the table that you have a very weak hand. If you're in the big blind and no one raises, and you snap check, immediately check, if they're thinking players, they might notice that as a weakness. So I just get used to, analyzing it. Okay, so on this flop, you flopped an open-ended straight draw. A 5 or a 9 gives you a straight, and it's a rainbow board. And because no one raised before the flop, there's there's no one that sort of has the betting lead. So I would likely lead bet on this as a semi bluff. I'd probably bet somewhere around a third pot to half a pot, 30 cents, give or take. So you checked, and then everyone else checked. So now that both of your opponents have checked on this flop, they all had an opportunity to bet. You can bet here 100% of the time and you will win it 75% of the time. And even if you don't win, you have a 5 or a 10 to give you a straight. So again, power of semi-bluffing is pretty big. So if this guy checks, I would bet. Okay, so you checked, and run checked, and now you just have nine high, so check fold, of course. But flopping an open end straight draw is a good opportunity to sort of semi-bluff there, and you would have taken that pot down almost definitely. And this is another one where you have just auto fold on. I think Jack 9 offsuit in the small blind is certainly worth 5 cents when the pot's going to be 60 or 70 cents. Obviously, if anyone raises, you would you'd fold, but I think for here, again, you'd risk in a nickel, and the pot would be 60 cents or 65 cents once you call that nickel. So you're going to get 12 to 1. So your hand is not that high and it's not suited, but it is a one gapper. Certainly worth you know, that half price thing. Okay, we're just reloading here. Skip ahead a little. Okay, 2 10s. See what happens here. Okay, so we got a limp. Sorry, we got a limp, a min raise, and you go 5x. See, this is better. See, this is a larger bet than with the queens, if you remember when I suggested you go bigger. This is a good size. I like this. You're gonna really force out the blinds most of the time. You likely are gonna get heads up just against one player and gets a really solid bet size. And then when this player good, that's excellent. You checked his stats right away. Fairly tight player. 26-15. I think this is close. I think against looser players, it would be a call, especially when they have a shorter stack. But I think against this particular player, like you have to ask yourself, what hands is he doing this with? Probably not aces, because aces would probably want to just 3-bet a little bit, right? So he probably has a hand like jacks, maybe queens, where he sees you showing strength and he's just going to shove it in. He could have ace king here, and against, you know, jacks, queens, let's say kings, and ace king, your tens isn't very good. If he's a looser player, he might do this with 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s. So if he does it with hands like that, if you look at his stats and he's like a 45-25, then I would certainly call with tens. And I think we can run, like I think I told you about Poker Stove before. So if you take your hand tens, 2 tens, and you put it against, let's say, you wouldn't do it with aces probably, kings, queens, jacks, ace king suited, ace king offsuit, and that's sort of the range of his hands. So that's a tight range. And then you evaluate, you're only going to have 36% equity against that. So if you look at the size of the pot, let's roll it a little bit further. So the pot's $15. Whoops. And you had to call, I think, $12 or $13. So you were basically getting 2 to 1 on your call. So you needed to win 1 in 3 times in order to justify a call. And if this is his range, you would only need to win, or you would actually win about 36%. So even against that tight range, I think calling would have been the better play. But if he has aces as well in his range, then it's probably a good fold. So now you're right at that bubble. Now you're right at your 33%. But if that player happened to be looser, and you can say, okay, he's definitely going to do it with 6s or 7s or 8s or 9s. Probably do it with a suited ace queen, a suited ace jack, maybe a king queen suited, and that would be his range. And then occasionally he's going to spew out and do it with like a 7-6 or an 8-7 suited. So when you put those hands in his range, then you're obviously going to call because you're actually a favorite against that range. So great to use the stats. You know, it's not a big deal to fold there or call. It's probably about the same mathematically, but I more wanted to run through the idea of like when you face a situation like this, what range of hands do you think your opponent might have, and how does your hand do against that range of hands? Because he's not just doing this with like, oh, he must have aces. That's not always the case. Oftentimes, like I said, they're less likely to have aces because they want to get as much value as they can with their aces. So you can sometimes take those hands out of the situation. Okay, another big one, ace jack. Okay, so again, I'm in raise. So now we've seen a pattern. This Junwick guy seems to love to open with his min raises. So you want 4x, so this is a little bit small because you have 20, 30, 40 cents in the pot. So you'd want to raise 4 times plus. Oh no, you did. That's right. So you actually did the perfect raise. My bad. So yeah, that's a decent raise. I like that. And you're trying to buy the button. So you're trying to get this guy to fold, this guy to fold, so you'll have to be the last to act, which gives you extra value. Okay, so this flop, you've got 1, 2, 3 callers. It's a rainbow flop. I would say against 3 opponents, it's a very dry flop. So there's really no draws out there. There's no flush draws. There's no straight draws. It's just a king. So if you were going to continuation bet, this is a pretty damn good board to do it on. But again, against really weak, shitty players who aren't going to ever fold an 8, and they might not fold like pocket 5s or something, the best play might be to just check and try and hit an ace on the turn. Or maybe bet on the turn if these two players check again. So, okay, you checked, that's good. So now this opponent bets, and you're just asking yourself, okay, did he bet a large amount? Did he bet a small amount? Decently large. He is in the most likely place to be betting because everyone checked to him. So that means his hand range would be weaker. But that being said, checking and folding is perfectly fine. It's likely what I would do. Queen 9, I would say with Queen 9, I would play this hand on the button. I would play it on the cutoff and be close on the hijack. You are in early-ish position, so I'd probably fold, but raising it's fine as well. And again, I just opened at 40 cents, not 30 cents. Okay, so you only got one caller, so that's good. And you flopped basically nothing. You have 2 overcards. You've got a backdoor flush draw, and you've got a backdoor straight draw. So in this situation, I would probably bet about half pot one time, between a third pot and a half pot, and just trying to get this guy to fold a hand kind of like yours, get him to fold a king jack or a king 10 or something like that. And then depending on the turn card, if he did call, I would likely bet again on the turn if it gave me a little bit more equity. So if the turn was a diamond, or if the turn was a 10, or if the turn was a jack, it would give me an actual draw, and I would likely bet again. So you bet 75% of pot. So this is another thing just to talk about is your percentage of pot betting. If you're just on a pure bluff or a mostly bluff, you don't need to bet so high. So you could get away with a half pot bet, 40% pot bet, sometimes a 30% pot bet, and then save your larger bets for when you have a lot of equity. Like if you had, 2 4s here, for example, you could bet, close to full pot. It's exploitable because if people pay attention, they'll be like, hey, wait a minute. When this guy bets not that much, he has a shitty hand, and when he bets a lot, he's got a good hand. But at these stakes, especially, people aren't going to be paying that much attention to that. So you got called, and now this is an example. Now I'd bet again. It's a larger card, so even if he's got like a 7 or a 4 or an 8, even now there's a bigger card on the board, and that actually gave you a straight draw. So Jack now gives you a straight. So I'd bet again. I'd bet about again 30-40% of the pot, let's say. You could go like $1.30, something like that, $1.40. And you're thinking 50%, that's a good bet. And now, see, there you go. So you did exactly that. Now I hope the reason you bet the turn is because you had a straight draw. And now that you have the absolute nuts, yeah, the absolute nuts on the river, I'd probably do 75% again. Um, Again, what you're trying to think of in this hand is what hand could my opponent have? So what are you targeting with this bet? If you think your opponent's really weak and he might only have a 7 or a 4 because he flopped like middle pair, and then two big overcards come out, he's probably not going to call a lot. But also, what if he's got a hand like Jack 8, or what if he was slow playing a hand like 7 8 or 2 4s? So again, it's hard to put a range on a very passive player who just calls a lot. But I'd probably kind of try and target a good hand, like a hand like a 2-pair hand, and I might bet like $4, something like that, about 70-80% of the pot. Oh, look at you! Are you clicking 4 exactly? That's crazy. There you go. Perfect. I think you played that hand very well. Okay, this is okay. So this is interesting. So again, I'm not sure your logic behind it, but you did raise 5x. I mean, sometimes I will raise more in early position to compensate for the fact that I'm in early position, but I don't think I've ever taught you that. So standard raise would still suffice for here of 40 cents. And you can already pick up, like, even without looking at stats, this is Itsy guy has played like the last 5 hands in a row, and that strat world as well. So here, again, you're out of position against 2 players. It's a fairly coordinated board with a 9-8 on board, so checking is fine. I'd probably check and okay, so this is interesting. So what I was going to say is I would check, and then if this player bets, I might call, I might raise, I might fold. Because this player is like the most likely player to be betting because everyone checked to him. This player betting out as the second person is a stronger play than this player betting as the third person, because the second player doesn't know what this guy has or what this guy could do. So I respect this bet a little bit more than if the strat world were to bet. So for this dollar, it's about half pot. I would fold. Yeah, that's fine. And again, if you had a little bit more equity, so if there was a diamond on the flop, and you had a backdoor flush draw along with a backdoor straight draw and 2 overs, you could call once, or you could turn a hand like this into a bluff once in a while. But again, the focus of this is your opponent's biggest mistakes are going to be calling too often and chasing weak draws. So you punish them by having good hands and having them pay you off, and not by very aggressive bluffing and such. Okay, so this is another example of check fold on, but I wouldn't just be snap checking. If someone raised very small, like that was a minimum raise to 20 cents, which this guy does with this entire range. So this could even be a spot. And I know I'm getting a little advanced here, but this player just called. This player that we know raises 20 cents with almost anything. You could have 3-bet ace 8 to like $1. Get these 2 players to fold and just get against this one player where you're in position against a weak player. And then you can just, your hand is probably better than his hand with just an ace 8 offsuit. So that's just food for thought. Again, a little bit more advanced. Okay, ace 5. It's been a massive raise. It's obviously a fold. Ace 7 on the button. So you have auto fold on here, but you are in the best possible position and you have a weak offsuit ace. So in certain instances, like if everyone were to fold, you might want to raise this and steal the blinds. So I wouldn't necessarily have auto fold on in that situation. Okay, 6 deuce, 8 9 off, easy peasy. 3 6 off, easy peasy. 5 4 suited. So this is a situational thing. It's what tier is it? Let's see what tier it is. It's a very borderline tier. So suited connectors are tier D. So these are good hands to play to steal the blinds, raise in late position, and many are good when you have 3 or more opponents. But they're not great when you're first in. You're under the gun, so you're the very early position. So you have the big disadvantage here. So if I'm in this position, I'd be raising basically S, A, and B. Like I'd be sticking with these hands. So nines and lower, even ace jack off. I mean, I'm not going to critique you if you play the tier ones on C because they're reasonably good hands at these stakes. But again, we're playing pretty tight because we're really focused on quality hands, and this is just a little bit too loose. Now you've got a player raising a massive 4-bet, so easy fold. Okay, so ace 10, and then a snap shove. So, okay, we looked at his stats. So he's super loose, but he's also pretty passive. But he likely is tilty, so I might have been paying attention to it. Did he just lose a big pot? If he just recently lost a big pot, I would probably um, min raise this all in and attempt to just get heads up against him because he probably has a huge range of hands that he could be doing this with. So there you go, perfect example. So he had 8-9 offsuit. So assuming that he's going to be kind of tilty, whatever, the reason you do a small raise is just to prevent or hopefully prevent these two guys from also getting in the pot. So just pay attention. If someone's lost a big pot recently, they tend to be super loose for the next bunch of hands because they're frustrated or tilty or whatever. So it's just a little read you can have at the tables. Queen 3 off is a fold, and then this guy jams again, so clearly he's on full tilt. So you just want to be able to king 3 off, 4-6 suited, fine, late position with some action, 2-4 off, 2-4 off, 3-5 off, easy fold. Okay, so let's go back to here. Okay, so this guy now, who has very loose stats, however, he's playing like a wild. He's been playing pretty wild the last few hands. Raises to 12 times the blind. So even against loose kind of wild players, you still have to wait for a decently premium hand. Ace 10 is probably borderline for this large of a raise. If he does a standard raise to 40 or 50, no probs. You can call it. But you may have like this really good read. Okay, so let's pause it here. So you might have a good read that he's super spewy, and if that's your read when you're playing, then that's totally fine to 3-bet. I would never 3-bet barely a min 3-bet. You want to incentivize him to fold with your 3-bet. So I would usually out of position 3-bet 4 times his raise, which would be $5, right? Because his raise was so huge. When you 3-bet so tiny, you're giving your opponent like 5-1 odds to call or 6-1 odds. Like they will never fold to a tiny 3-bet. So unless you're milking them because you have aces, that would be the only time I would do a tiny 3-bet like that. So calling would have been okay. I don't like 3-betting here. And folding would probably be what I would do. And I would say I'll wait for a little bit better hand. But if you have a read that he's spewy, I mean, I don't know. It's tough. Okay, so you got called. Queen, queen 5 board. I bet like 25% pot. I bet like $1.40. I try to basically get him to fold the same hand that we have. You've got nothing, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, 1 overcard. So I bet very, very small here. Because otherwise you're just like, you bet 2/3 pot into like what we know is a very loose player. So you're basically bluffing a player that loves to call and doesn't like to fold. So he could have like 2 7s here and he's never folding, or 2 6s or 2 5, or not 2 5s, like 2 4s, and he's probably never calling. So again, the concept is get the good hands, and these guys who are calling like madmen will call you with stupid hands, but then you have a better hand and you win the pot. But yeah, betting like a large bet there, I think, is a pretty big mistake. I think 3-betting tiny was a pretty big mistake. So now that you've bet and got called, I mean, check folding. That's really all you can do here. And then when he checked the turn, I wouldn't snap check the river like you just had given up, which is fine. But really analyze the situation. Like this could be a time to say, okay, my hand has a little bit of showdown value. So there's a chance he has a hand like, just an ace four or some random 10 jack hand or something, or jack king hand that maybe he wasn't willing to fold on the flop. So if he has a hand like that, you could win, right, by checking. But also, maybe he's got a hand like the ace four of spades, which you could get him to fold, or like the ace jack of spades, which you could get him to fold. So there might be an opportunity on this river to make a very small bet, 20% pot, 15% pot, just to try and fold their absolute worst, like missed draws essentially. But I think checking and likely folding is going to be the best. But I would check and to see how much he bets to determine what to do, really. I'd think about it. But I definitely wouldn't. Yeah, that just bluffing into there again is pretty spewy. He's showing you that he's not folding. So yeah, I think that was just overall. There's lots of opportunities to learn from that situation. You're in a poor position. He did a tiny 3-bet, yeah, and then you sort of bluffed in two different opportunities when it was unlikely that your opponent was going to fold. All right, no big deal. So this would certainly be a hand you could complete for 5 more cents. You're in a terrible position, so you wouldn't want to raise or anything. Obviously, now that there's been a raise, you're going to fold. Easy peasy. Oh, you have 8-9 in your raise. Okay. Let me see this one. So you had 1 limper, 2 limpers. You went to 40, so you didn't account for them when you raised. So I'd go to 60 here. Other than that, it's perfectly fine. You got a pretty high suited connector on the best possible position. I like it. Okay, everyone calls. So look at this board. Is this board wet or dry? It's pretty dry. There's no flush draws at all. There's no face cards. There's no, 7-8 would make a straight draw, but there really isn't a lot of straight draws. I would say this is a good board for you. Obviously, you've got top pair. You've got a backdoor flush draw. Assuming everyone checks to you, I would certainly bet. I'd do a nice half pot bet, maybe bet $1, $1.20, something like that. See what you do. Oh, there you go, half pot bet, perfect. And you win. Look at that. We played that hand 10 out of 10. Okay, 9 deuce, fold. King 9. This could be, like I'd say, button or cutoff. You could raise with it if you first went in. Obviously, when there's a 4x open by a early position player, this is just a fold. Okay, so again, you're using this very tiny 3-bets, which I do not like. If you're going to 3-bet this, you have to go to at least 120. You got to go 3 times the raise. Your goal with a 3-bet is to isolate. It's to get just against him. So by doing this 70, you're giving a chance for other opponents to get involved. And it's too weak of a hand to call a raise. Like that, you have to have some respect that when someone raises an early position, and even though these guys are terrible fish, it's sort of a players will get better and better as you get up in stakes. So the earlier their position, typically the tighter their hand ranges should be. So small 3-bet, I don't like this. And then it looks like you're going to get lots of callers, so that's fine. Okay, so now you have 3 opponents. You've got nothing, a backdoor flush draw and an overcard. So I would be giving up in this spot. I would be checking. Perfect. Okay, so you did turn equity. So a Jack gives you a straight, so that's cool. I would say this could be an opportunity to bluff because everyone has shown weakness here. Went check, 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 check. If these first two players check, you could attempt to semi-bluff because now you have a straight draw by betting about $1, about half pot, even less even. But checking's fine as well. When this guy leads the turn, you're just going to fold, no big deal. You might say, why am I going to fold? What if I get a jack? So the answer is you have to call $1.70. You're trying to win $6. So you're getting about 3 to 1, 4 to 1, right? So you need about, let's say 20%, 25% equity in order to call. There's 4 jacks left, and you know you have 4 outs. You multiply by 2 to get from turn to river. So you'll have an 8% chance of hitting a jack. So you need to get 20%, and you're going to get 8%. What's even worse, the jack of hearts, or sorry, the jack of clubs, that's 3 to a flush. So it doesn't even give you necessarily the best hand. So technically you have 3 like good outs to hit your jack. So you have 6% chance, almost 20 to 1 against hitting a nice jack. So even though you've got a straight draw, it's a good time to fold. Okay, you folded, good stuff. Jack 8, early position, good fold. All right, you got a couple of jackies. Gonna raise to 50, that's fine. You can go to 40, you can go to 50. Okay, you got 3-bet by, I think this is a pretty wild player. And you got cold called, so this might be a spot to get it in. I mean, I'd look at his stats, of course, as long as he's relatively loose. Jacks is a little bit better than tens, and remember when we analyzed tens, even against a pretty tight range of like ace, king, and then kings, queens, and jacks, you're like a 2 to 1 dog. But I think there's also this extra dead money. There's $1.50 in the pot that is theoretically dead. So it's an extra, there's $4 in the pot instead of like the normal amount. So I'd probably 4-bet and I would go to about $5. But I'd check this guy's stats 100% just to make sure. If he's tight, I'd just call. If he's looser, I'd 4-bet. Okay, so you just call. All right, so this is interesting because he flopped full house. It's pretty awesome. So your thought process here is basically like, I hope to God one of my opponents has an ace, and I'm going to bet fairly small on the flop if check to. Or you could consider checking just because the player who raised before the flop is right after you and trying to get a check raise in there. But I might lead for $1.50 to start to build the pot. Like again, a third the size of the pot. I might check to this guy. If he bets, I might do a tiny raise. Again, we're just trying to slowly get all of our chips into the pot if we can. Oh, I think he checked his stats. I didn't see. That's okay. Oh, good. Yes, very small bet. I like that. Okay, you got everyone to call, so that's beautiful. Now the turn's going to come, and you love that turn because now it completes some straight draws. It does make ace queen have a better hand than you, but if you get full house over full house, such is life. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about that. Now I'm going to do math. I'm going to say, okay, if I want to get my whole stack in by the river, about how much do I have to bet here? So that might be $4, $5, because if you bet $5, get a caller for 5, that's $10 plus 8 in the pot, that's $18. Then you would only have 12 left, so I think a $4 or $5 bet would be perfectly fine here, about half pot. Okay, you bet even smaller, so I think you could definitely bet bigger there. And then, well, you did the right play by shoving the river, so it's actually a pretty good river card aside from ace king. Ace king would suck if you had ace king. But the only difference I would have done there was bet a little bit more on the turn so that when you shove the river, it's a little bit less than a pot size shove, if that makes sense. And he's got ace queen. So again, nothing you can do about that. If you run into a bigger full house, c'est la vie. I think you played it quite well. Your options on the flop would have been you could have checked to him and then raised. That would have been totally fine. And on the turn, you could have bet a little bit more so that your shove on the river would be a little bit less. But again, this is just a setup hand. Setup hands happen all the time in poker when it's a monster against a monster. Sometimes you're going to have the ace queen, sometimes your opponent will have the ace queen. So you didn't play anything wrong about this. This is just the random sort of luck nature of poker. All right, 5-8 off. So again, I just wouldn't click that just because it looks weak to your opponents when you snap check in the big blind. And they'll be more likely to bluff you on the flop if they see that. And this could be one, again, you could complete you're risking 5 cents and there's 80 cents in the pot. So you're getting laid 16 to 1, right? So again, if you do call with a weak hand like this from the small blind, you're trying to flop a straight. You're trying to flop 8, 9, 10, or two pair, Jack 7, 4, something like that. You have to have discipline if you're going to play a hand like Jack 7 to fold if there's a Jack. Even if Jack's top pair, if there's a lot of action, if you get raised, you're going to be folding top pair. And if you don't have that discipline, then folding's fine. But there might be spots, I think, in the small blind where you could complete and you'd have a little bit more profit. But that being said, playing tight is perfect. 9-3, 8-2, 6-5. Okay, 5-4 early position. Let me check because you did have 5-4 suited and you raised with it, and now you snap fold. So again, it's just consistency. The fold is better than the raise, but really iron down these, understand like the tier Ds, the A's and B's and C's. So you're just sort of playing a little more consistent. Oh, you got a straight flush draw. That's exciting. All right, 6-3 off, 4-5 off in the small. Another example of one where it goes call, 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 fold. You could complete with the 4-5 off. Obviously, never calling any raises, but small blind specials lets you play a few more hands. 6-10, 5-10, 2-5, good folds. So just by folding these garbagey hands, you're going to be ahead of the game. King 6 off. It looks like you got a free flop with 4-8. And again, see how quickly you check there? It looks weak, so I just would avoid auto checking. Okay, flop nothing. I would say the only thing you might bet on the turn is if it came a diamond, then you could bet as a semi bluff. Other than that, you're just giving up. Again, you just looked at their stats. They're both very loose, like to call, like to not fold. And checking again, it's fine. I'm assuming you're going to fold. Jack 9, same idea. You could certainly complete 5 cents. You're going to fold now because that guy raised. And the other thing is when you get in higher stakes, you're going to get in more blind battles because players are going to play tighter. So sometimes you're going to want to steal the big blind. If everyone folds to you and you're in the small blind, you might want to steal with a hand like Jack 9 because you only have one opponent. So just get out of the habit of auto folding your blinds, especially. You can auto fold like all your other positions. Okay, perfect. Okay, early position player 4x's, you 3-bet. This time you go even bigger, you go 4 times. So you just have some inconsistencies with your bet sizing. I've noticed sometimes you're raising to 40, sometimes you're raising to 60, sometimes you're 3-betting really tiny. This time you're 3-betting 4 times the raise, or 4 times the bet. I'd be aware this guy only has a half stack, which means I'm more likely to get my stack in against him with a hand like this. Because it tends to be weaker players who have short stacks. But overall, fantastic. 4-bet, easily get it in if he shoves. Terrible flop for you. So in this instance, I would make one tiny 20 or 25% pot bet like 90 cents or $1.10. And the purpose of that tiny bet is just to get him to fold when he has like ace four of hearts or um, ace seven of diamonds or maybe pocket fours or pocket fives. Like, I mean, those hands you don't necessarily need to have fold, but you're just basically getting him to fold like his weakest of his weakest hands. And if he raises, then it's an easy, like if you bet a tiny bit and he does a big raise, it's an easy fold, right? So you check back, which is fine. I mean, even when there's three spades on board and a king, doesn't necessarily mean that you're only against one opponent, right? And he's clearly a weaker opponent. So I would still have bet a small amount on that flop. Because again, why would I bet 80 cents? Because I'm risking 80 cents and my chances to win 365. So a dollar bet even, it only needs to work 30% of the time to be profitable. And on top of that, what if your opponent had a hand like the ace of spades with a seven? You actually do have the best hand, and you're going to get value from that bet because he's going to be calling you with a weaker hand. Or what if he has a hand like two tens or two sevens or two sixes or two fives? You're going to be getting value from that. So this is good to bet the turn. I like that. That was great. Your opponent showed weakness. So again, this is just inconsistency. You had a king nine suited about 10 minutes ago, or 15 minutes ago, let's say, and you three bet someone with it, or called a big raise. I don't remember. I think you three bet with it, and now you're in a decent position and you're choosing to fold it. So just again, I think getting to understand the hand ranges. Like a king nine suited is in the danger hands. Actually, it's not even really in a tier, but just sort of get used to having consistency within your hand ranges. All right, moving on. 7-9, your hand table's getting a bit short. 10-3 in the small blind. 8-3 on the button. How did this happen? Oh, you just folded. Never mind. 7-5 is a fold. Okay, you got a big one, ace queen. How did this go down? Okay, raised to 50 cents. That's perfectly fine. With one limper especially. You got heads up against one player. This is a pretty dynamic board. 10-7-6, lots of straight draws, lots of flush draws, so I'd proceed with caution here. Again, I would bet here 100% of the time, maybe bet between a third pot and half pot. He'll get the job done. If he does have like king queen offsuit or king jack offsuit, he will probably fold. So I would be betting here just about, say, 60 cents. So you decided to check back, which, I think it's okay to continuation bet 100% of the time when you're only against one opponent, especially when you're in position. Now you did turn equity. You turned a straight draw, so a jack now gives you a straight. So I think you could certainly turn your hand into a bluff by betting. Again, you don't have to bet a huge amount, but maybe bet, I don't know, 60, 70 cents. And now you river a pair. So it's a tricky spot. I mean, your opponent bet small, so I think it's an easy call. Sure, he could have a flush, he could have a straight, he could have two pair, a lot of hands he could have, but again, you're calling 75 cents to win 225, getting about 3.5 to 1. Yeah, you showed incredible passivity the entire hand, so the more passive you are in a hand, the more chances your opponent is going to be to bluff because you're showing weakness. So that's another reason to call here. So I definitely call. I would not raise here. When you raise here, what are you trying to get to call you? So you raise to $1.50. What hand is he going to have that's going to call this raise that doesn't beat your ace queen, right? So when he bets, he could have a worse hand than your ace queen, absolutely. But when you raise, it forces him almost to have a better hand than your ace queen. So he's going to end up only calling when he has a better hand than you and folding when he has a weaker hand than you. So I really don't like this raise. I'd rather you just call. And he calls. And wow, that very much surprises me that you win. With that being said, these are terrible players. So this guy's just super passive. So if we played it sort of in the way I suggested, small bet on the flop, he would have called with his top pair. I would have turned equity. I would have bet again. He would have called, and then I don't know, the river. I might not have bet the river. So the same about thing would have happened, but that was a very interesting river raise. And he proved me wrong by actually betting and then calling a raise with third pair. So this just is a beautiful example of how you beat these players. You get a good hand, you play a good hand like ace queen, you don't play a hand like 9-10, and then you have the best hand and you bet it for value. So cool. Okay, early position 7-5, good fold. Skip to hand king 7. This again, it's fine to fold this, but if this player is really tight, you could steal his blind. That would be fine too, with all sorts of weaky hands. Assume you're gonna fold this. Fold it. Fold. Good. Fold 7-8. King 6 early position. Fold. Good stuff. 7 deuce. Fold. And maybe that's the last hand. We'll see if there's one more hand in here or not. And we have 7-9 suited. And I would not snap fold that. That's a little too tight from the big blind, only because you have already 10 cents in, it's 20 cents more, so you're calling 20 cents to win $1. You're getting 5-1. You have a decent hand that plays decently well, and you're against a very wide range of hands because he's on the button. So the later your opponents, the wider their hands are going to be. So, I mean, I would call sometimes with this hand. I would 3-bet sometimes with this hand. If I were to 3-bet, I would 3-bet very large. I would probably 3-bet to like $1.50 just to try and steal these two guys 30 cents. But again, a little more advanced, 9-7 suited, I would say, is a good hand to call with. All right, I think overall I'm very happy with your play. I think you had like one or two minor hiccups where you kind of spewed a little bit, you kind of spazzed out a bit in one hand, and then you just had one unfortunate hand for a stack. But other than that, I thought you played disciplined. You made lots of good folds. You played probably a few hands in ways that were unusual, that were just inconsistent, so you want to learn a consistency. So like if I'm in early position, I'm playing these hands. If I'm on the button, I'm going to play all these hands. And then your bet sizing, excuse me, having a little more consistent. When I'm in position and I'm 3-betting, I'm going to raise to 3 times my opponent's bet. When I'm out of position and I'm 3-betting, I'm going to raise to 4 times, things like that. But other than that, that was a solid session, like 7 out of 10. Good job. Hope you enjoyed the review. I wonder if this is going to help you.